Well, hello everyone. This is Fadi, and with me here in our studios virtually, our dear brother Lloyd De Jongh, and we've been really going through many aspects and components of what we call the Islamic Sharia law. That's why we called this particular video series Sharia Law, the Islamic Talmud. It's really what my brother told me the other day. It's almost equivalent to the Jewish Talmud, but the Islamic community, or at least the Islamic community of scholars in this case, developed their own version of that Talmud. We've talked about the authority of the scholars, and today we are going to talk about something called the pillars of Sharia. And of course, with me here to unpack all of that for all of us is our dear brother Lloyd. Lloyd, thank you again as always. And it's fascinating, really, the many aspects that you've been bringing to the table and even the references. Everybody can see the reference. It's not like your opinion. It's actually you are sometimes verbatim sharing these legal opinions and these sources. Yep. So what do we have to say about the pillars of Sharia?
Okay, so yeah, these, I'm only going to highlight two. There are 6 pillars of the Sharia. I'm going to highlight 2 so that people can understand the moral, or shall we say immoral basis of the Sharia. So the Sharia will tell us that the aims are more important than the means, which has been a call that has led to atrocities. So notice that states here, al-maqasid aqadu min al-wasa'il. So the aims are more important than the means. In other words, you can use any means necessary to achieve the aims. As long as you achieve the outcome that is favorable to Islam, the means do not matter. This is an invitation to commit crimes in the name of the greater good. Crimes in the name of, well, we did it for the good. We did it for Islam. Can you see the potential for abuse here, Al-Fadi?
Right. Absolutely. Absolutely. Each one of them is disturbing, to be honest with you, to me at least, but unfortunately, others do not see it this way. At least others in authority do not see it this way.
Yeah. And of course, another principle within the Sharia is that necessities permit the forbidden. They call it al-darurat tubih al-mahsurat. So necessities permit the forbidden. In other words, it is legal for a Muslim to break any and every Islamic ruling, every and any Islamic law, if he feels there is a quote unquote necessity, if there is some sort of hardship. This is very poorly defined, but if he feels there is a reason, you can literally violate every single law and simply state, well, I did it because it was necessary.
Yeah.
And thus, this leaves open the room for massive deceit, massive deception. And if the aims are more important than the means, if you need to commit an atrocity because it's ultimately you think the aim is that Allah will be victorious, well, then the aims do not matter. Sorry, the ends, the means you've used do not matter as long as the ends are, consistent with the will of Allah. So this is something
almost like,
very,
it's almost like you're summarizing these two by saying the ends justify the means.
Yes, that's exactly, the ends justify the means. Correct. This is exactly what it says. Yes, thank you for stating it that way. Yeah, and this is, so a book from Shar'ani, he wrote the Mizan al-Kubra, the Great Balance, the Supreme Scales, and he created the doctrine of ikhtilaf, or difference. So you mentioned earlier to me, outside of the show, the 4 schools, and are there differences between them? And yes, but there are also more similarities. So let's say you've got 20% differences in things that are not going to affect doctrine. These are simply things that are on a surface level, not important things. So for instance, we've mentioned before, when a Muslim prays, does he hold his hands up here by his head, by his face to pray? Does he hold it down by his navel? That does not affect doctrine in any way. And so there are far more things that are in common in the ijma than differences. So these are not 4 separate religions. These are four ways of expressing your deen, which are all in harmony. And that is what was learned. Basically, he created this doctrine which says that Islam is in harmony. And of course, this is explained by azima and rukhsa, strictness, and dispensation, rukhsa, looseness. Comparatively studies the rulings of all 4 Sunni schools of sacred law as if they were a single school, treating their differences according to their difficulty, as either strictness, azima, or dispensation, rukhsa. So it's really a level of difficulty. It's not contradiction. It's just in that those who are more capable are more strict, and those who are not capable, well, they can literally abandon the tenets of Islam entirely, and yet they will still get reward because Allah recognizes their weakness. Or they can do it for the purposes of claiming there was some sort of issue and therefore they had to violate every Islamic law, and Allah still recognizes that as following Islamic law. So there is no hard moral line in Islam. There is none. There is nothing that is sacrosanct or absolute. Any comment, Al-Fadi?
No, I mean it's very clear here, and thank you for bringing that up because the word ikhtilaf or differences. Sometimes people think that there are differences that can create problems, but here the effort is to try to reconcile them.
Yeah. And if we continue with the slides, just to wrap this up, then dispensation, right? Rukhsa, strictness, azima. Notice they mention in the Sharia, inter-school differences considered as dispensation. So the differences between the schools are just considered, the scholars said, this looseness is allowed by Allah. And notice they can take from other legal schools on the top right here, taking from other legal schools. This is allowed. So they can borrow ideas from different schools. This is possible. And notice, rukhsa is permission, looseness, a relaxing or suspending by way of exception, an injunction in Islam, and its counterpart is azima. So, well, just as a side note, there's a heavy discussion of magic within the Encyclopaedia of Islam. Roughly half of the terms or 40% of the terms always have some connotation to the occult or to the magical. And azima is one of those things because when you do magical incantations and spells, you have to be precise, and this requires azima. So azima is in religious law is an ordinance that is interpreted strictly, the opposite of rukhsa, an exemption. And in magic, it is an adjuration or the application of a formula of which magical effects are expected. This is actually very common in Islam, discussions of magic, which we don't talk about very much, but this does exist. All right, so basically, scholars pitch this diversity between the four schools as a mercy from Allah to accommodate all, to accommodate people's shortcomings and their varying circumstances. They're not contradictory. So this is Allah's way of saying, well, I understand you can't, so here you can do this at a lower grade. All right. So, and that ends part 1. Do you have any questions or comments, Al-Fadi, before I move on to the historical aspect of Islam?
Well, we can pause for the historic until next episode. Let's unpack this so far based on what we've covered. How can the Muslim on the street who doesn't know anything about this try to reconcile the differences between himself and, let's say, a friend of his who follows a different Sharia school? Let's say I am a Hanbali and I discover that my friend is Hanafi. Is this a cause for them to really have a stifle or rift between them? Or should they be open-minded and try to at least consult the sources? Forget about asking the scholars, at the mosque, but at least consult the sources to understand this.
So a Muslim is not allowed to criticize another Muslim. This is illegal. It is considered backbiting. It is considered potentially slander, which is riba, which is a crime. And so this also will lead to them, losing favor with the law and could end up in hell. So they have to simply follow a scholar. They're not to have this debate amongst themselves. They must ask those who know if they do not know, as we covered in the previous episode. So they must attach themselves to an imam, and that imam will be one who will guide them and tell them what to do. This is also, if you think of the Pharisees with their works, with their believing that their salvation came strictly from their works, this exactly is a works-based religion. If you follow these rules and do these things perfectly, you will then earn paradise. You will be like Muhammad. It is purely about imitation works. So they're not to criticize each other, and these differences are a dispensation from Allah, so Allah should not be criticized.
Yeah. Another question is, geographically speaking, if you were to look at the world map, are there themes when it comes to areas that follows the majority,
Yes.
follows certain school? If you can elaborate a little bit on that also.
Yes, actually, I do cover that a little bit. That will be upcoming. But
okay, that's good.
Yeah, so different schools are more strict. In some things they're more strict and some less strict. And this is considered acceptable because these came from the companions of Muhammad. And if they did them, they were considered, this is acceptable practice.
Very good. One last question for you before we wrap this up. Are you aware of any contemporary or progressive Sharia law school that is attempting to at least place itself on the world stage of Sharia law? Anyone today is trying to say, well, you know what? All of these are old scholars, previous scholars. they're 7th century, 8th century, 9th century scholars. We're living in the 21st century, and we should reinterpret the Quran now. And this is our school that we want to back up or support.
I think there are efforts to do so by some, and I don't think they have any leg to stand on. I don't think they will honestly gain traction. Some of them are efforts at just propaganda, but I believe I just, when you mentioned something, there was a thought in my head, because the Quran distinctly speaks against that. And there was something specifically which I wanted to bring up, which I've just somehow forgotten, just slipped my mind. But no, this is not something that can be done, because one would then go against the practice of Muhammad. You'd go against the Sunnah, you'd go against the word of Allah, because the Quran is eternal. So how can you then claim that Muhammad is wrong? Remember, we showed earlier that to claim that Muhammad did anything wrong, and the scholars are claimed to be faultless and blameless and without error, completely without error, this would then be a crime, as we discussed in the unsheathed sword episode. If you criticize Allah or Muhammad, this is an insult, and that must be meted out. Well, the penalty of death is meted out for that.
That is true. And the reason why I bring it up, because, Muslims these days say, no, that's not how we interpret this verse about jihad. That's not what jihad means. This is not how we do things. Oh, that's the opinion of that scholar. Our scholars today have gained better knowledge, to try to interpret things. So that's why I would bring it up, because you're going to hear things like this. And of course, I don't blame them. Obviously, they say it because either they're embarrassed about the ruling, or they don't agree with the ruling, and they're just trying to find a way to justify it without violating their allegiance, of course, to Allah and Muhammad.
Yeah, no, I think so. There's saving face.
Very good. Well, thank you, of course, brother. You've heard that next time, folks, we will be venturing into what we call part 2 of this video series, and we're going to start to explore the history or the historical aspects of Sharia law, and that should be fascinating in and of itself. Thank you, brother. Thank you, everyone. This is Al-Fadi. God bless. Thank you for watching this video. Be sure to like and subscribe to our channel, CIRA International, and click on the bell so that you receive notifications whenever we publish a new video or go live. I would also like to appeal to you to consider becoming a Patreon patron by clicking the link right below. By doing so, you can give towards the production of these videos. There are also other options for you where you can give to our channel. I thank you from the bottom of my heart.